3 in the morning, heart racing, eyes wide open. What's the point of any of this? That question, the one that ambushes you in the darkness when the distractions fall away, almost killed one of the greatest minds in history. Leo Tolstoy, literary genius, wealthy count, celebrated worldwide, put a loaded gun in his desk drawer because he couldn't answer it. He hid ropes from himself, avoided windows, feared what he might do in moments of weakness, not because he failed, because he succeeded, and discovered that everything he'd been told would give his life meaning was a catastrophic lie. But Tolstoy didn't pull the trigger. He found something, an answer so powerful it transformed not just his life, but sparked revolutions across continents and still echoes today. What he discovered might just save you too. Look at your bucket list, the dreams, the goals, the things you're certain will make you happy. Tolstoy achieved them all. Born in 1828 to Russian nobility, he had wealth without working, servants handling his every need, and social status from birth. The original born on third base, think you hit a triple life. In his youth, he gambled, slept around, fought in wars, and did what privileged men do. Nothing special, except his mind. His mind was a precision instrument that could dissect human psychology down to the cellular level. When he wrote War and Peace, that book you pretend to have read, it wasn't just well received, it was revolutionary. 500,000 words that captured the Napoleonic Wars and human nature so perfectly that his contemporary Dostoevsky called him God's gift to Russia. Anna Karenina followed, another masterpiece. Think about today's most successful people, the billionaire tech founders, the A-list celebrities, the political kingmakers. Tolstoy was all of them combined in 19th century Russia. Fame, global. Fortune, enormous. Family, 13 children and a countess wife. Legacy, secured for centuries. The achievement unlocked. The game completed. The summit reached. And that's precisely when everything collapsed. It started with a question that wouldn't leave him alone. What's the meaning of all this? What's the point? Not an idle philosophical musing. A crushing, paralyzing existential crisis that made daily functioning nearly impossible. In his Confessions, Tolstoy wrote, "I felt that what I had been standing on had collapsed and that I had nothing left under my feet. What I had lived by no longer existed, and there was nothing left." Think about that. The man who had everything suddenly felt he had nothing, because he glimpsed a truth we all desperately avoid. Every achievement, every pleasure, every possession has the same expiration date: your death. No amount of success can change this equation. No level of fame can make you immortal. No wealth can bribe the laws of physics. And if everything ends in oblivion, Tolstoy wondered, why bother with any of it? He described this period like someone hanging by two threads above an abyss, knowing that inevitably these threads would soon break and the horror of feeling the abyss beneath. Dramatic? Maybe. But ask yourself honestly, have you built your life's meaning on things that will disappear when you die? Your career? Gone. Your possessions? Redistributed. Your social media legacy? Please. Tolstoy saw this future with brutal clarity, and it broke him. His family watched in horror as the literary titan became a shell, unable to write, barely eating, constantly contemplating suicide. He later wrote, "The thought of self-destruction now came to me as naturally as thoughts of how to improve my life had come previously." This wasn't depression as we typically understand it. This was a man who had completed the game of life according to society's rules, only to discover he'd been playing the wrong game entirely. Tolstoy wasn't going down without a fight. He attacked this problem with the same genius he brought to his novels. First stop, science. Surely the rational, evidence-based approach could tell him why his existence mattered. Physics showed him a universe of cause and effect, matter in motion, heat, death awaiting everything. Biology revealed humans as complex animals, programmed for survival and reproduction. Astronomy exposed our cosmic insignificance. Specks on a speck orbiting a medium-sized star. Science could explain how the universe worked, but not why it mattered that he was part of it. Next, philosophy. He plunged into the great thinkers, ancient to modern, looking for the answer that would save him. Socrates, Schopenhauer, Kant, Buddha. Brilliant minds who'd wrestled with the same questions. Some said meaning comes through virtue. Others said it was about minimizing suffering. Some claimed there was no meaning at all. Contradictory, abstract, unsatisfying. Religion, then. Raised Orthodox Christian, Tolstoy re-examined the Gospels, then expanded to study every major faith. He found wisdom in all of them, glimpses of truth, but also institutions corrupted by power and dogma that contradicted their founders' teachings. No ready-made answer appeared. Meanwhile, the abyss kept calling. The gun remained in the drawer. The question remained unanswered. What saved Tolstoy wasn't in any book. It was right in front of him all along. The peasants on his estate, people who worked Tolstoy's land, who lived in poverty, who struggled daily for basic needs, had something he didn't. Peace. These weren't people who'd avoided life's hardships. They faced more suffering in a year than Tolstoy had in his lifetime. Infant mortality, hunger, back-breaking labor, winter cold, summer heat, sickness without doctors. Yet they moved through life with a quiet dignity that he, with all his advantages, couldn't comprehend. Tolstoy began spending time among them, not as their noble master, but as a student. He worked in the fields, ate simple meals, listened to their stories. What he discovered humbled him. These uneducated people weren't avoiding the big questions about existence. They were living the answers through. Faith that life had meaning beyond individual pleasure and pain. Connection to family, community, and tradition. Acceptance of mortality as natural, not something to be feared. Purpose built around service to others, not personal glory. They didn't fear death because they didn't live for themselves alone. They were threads in a larger tapestry, links in a chain extending backward and forward through time. This revelation hit Tolstoy with the force of gravity. The meaning of life wasn't something you figured out intellectually. It was something you created through how you lived. And the way to create meaning was both blindingly simple and excruciatingly difficult. Stop making yourself the center of the universe. Live for something larger than yourself. Pour your energy into reducing others' suffering rather than increasing your pleasure. I understood, Tolstoy wrote, that if I want to understand life and its meaning, I must live not a parasitic life, but a real life. And accepting the meaning given to it by real humanity, merge myself in that life. In plain language, stop obsessing about your happiness. Start focusing on your contribution. This wasn't just a nice idea Tolstoy wrote about. It detonated his entire existence. If meaning comes through serving others and living simply, then his aristocratic lifestyle wasn't just meaningless, it was actively harmful. It was built on exploitation, excess, and ego. So Count Leo Tolstoy, literary superstar, wealthy nobleman, global celebrity, did something unthinkable. He gave away his wealth. He renounced his copyrights. He dressed in peasant clothes and learned to make his own boots. He created schools for peasant children. He became vegetarian and swore off alcohol and tobacco. He embraced radical nonviolence decades before Gandhi. His wife thought he'd lost his mind. Russian high society was scandalized. The Orthodox Church excommunicated him. But for the first time in years, Tolstoy was at peace. As soon as I understood that life has a meaning connected to the life of others, my desire to kill myself vanished. Think about that sentence. Really think about it. The man who had everything had to give it all away to find the one thing that mattered. What exactly did Tolstoy discover? Not just some vague, be nice to others platitude. He developed a complete philosophical system based on 5 core principles: rational consciousness, using reason to question harmful social norms rather than blindly following tradition. Universal love, not just for family or countrymen, but for all humans regardless of nationality, race, or status. Nonviolence, complete rejection of physical force as a means of achieving goals. This would later inspire Gandhi's movement in India. Personal simplicity, minimizing possessions and luxury to reduce one's burden on others and the earth. The kingdom within, finding truth through direct personal experience rather than through institutions or authorities. These ideas weren't just personal preferences. They were revolutionary in 19th century Russia, a militaristic empire built on class hierarchy, nationalism, and Orthodox Christianity. Tolstoy was essentially saying the entire social order is backward. Power structures exist to perpetuate themselves, not serve humanity. His writings from this period, "The kingdom of God is within you," "What is religion?" "The law of love and the law of violence," became manifestos for nonviolent resistance movements worldwide. Mahatma Gandhi corresponded directly with Tolstoy and credited his ideas as fundamental to India's independence movement. Martin Luther King Jr. cited Tolstoy's work as influential to his philosophy of nonviolent protest. Think about that legacy. From the depths of suicidal despair, Tolstoy emerged with ideas so powerful they helped liberate nations. Why? Because he was willing to ask the questions most of us spend our lives avoiding. Fascinating history lesson, you might be thinking. But what does some Russian aristocrat's crisis from 150 years ago have to do with me? Everything. Because you're caught in the same trap Tolstoy was. You've been sold the same lie. That meaning comes through achievement, acquisition, and individual pleasure. That your worth equals your productivity. That your value is your bank account. That your happiness depends on others' approval. Look around. We're the richest, most comfortable humans who've ever lived, and we're anxious, depressed, and alienated. Suicide rates climb. Loneliness spreads like a virus. The more connected we become online, the more isolated we feel in reality. We chase the next promotion, relationship, house, vacation, body, or follower count, certain this will be the one that finally makes me happy. It never is. Because Tolstoy was right. The meaning isn't in what you get, it's in what you give. Let's be brutally honest. You will die. Everything you accumulate will go to others. Every achievement will eventually be forgotten. The only thing that doesn't disappear is the impact you have on other living beings. The love you create, the suffering you reduce, the beauty you bring into being. Here's where Tolstoy's discovery gets really interesting. He found that directly pursuing happiness is precisely what makes it impossible to attain. Happiness, he realized, is like a butterfly. Chase it and it eludes you. But focus on something else, something meaningful, and it may alight on your shoulder. This isn't just poetic imagery. Modern psychology confirms it. Studies show that pursuing extrinsic goals, money, fame, beauty, leads to anxiety, depression, and emptiness even when those goals are achieved. Meanwhile, focusing on intrinsic goals, personal growth, close relationships, community contribution, consistently correlates with lasting fulfillment. Tolstoy figured this out through anguish, not data, but the conclusion is the same. The direct pursuit of personal happiness is a recipe for misery. The pursuit of meaning through contribution creates happiness as a side effect. This is the great paradox. You find yourself by forgetting yourself. You become fulfilled by focusing on fulfilling others' needs. You discover your purpose by serving purposes larger than your own desires. Think about the happiest moments in your life. Were they purely self-focused? Or did they involve connection, contribution, losing yourself in something greater? There's a mental exercise Tolstoy used that you might find valuable. Imagine yourself on your deathbed, looking back at your life. What will matter then? Will you care about how many followers you had, the size of your house, the promotions you received, the grudges you held, the arguments you won? Or will you care about the love you gave and received, the people whose lives you improved, the beauty you created or protected, the wisdom you gained and shared? This isn't a morbid exercise, it's clarifying. Death is the ultimate bullshit detector. When you're staring at your finite days, the inessential falls away. What remains is what truly matters. Tolstoy's great insight was that we don't have to wait until we're dying to gain this clarity. We can live now with death as our advisor, letting its reality sharpen our choices rather than paralyze us with fear. I'm not suggesting you give away all your possessions tomorrow or start making your own shoes like Tolstoy did. His transformation was extreme because his crisis was extreme. Your path might look different, but the principle holds. Meaning comes through connection and contribution, not acquisition and achievement. Here's what implementing Tolstoy's discovery might look like in practical terms. Rational consciousness. Question the values society has programmed into you. Are you chasing status, wealth, or approval because they truly fulfill you, or because you've been conditioned to want them? Universal love. Expand your circle of concern beyond your immediate tribe. Practice seeing others, even those different from you, as equally deserving of dignity and care. Nonviolence. Resolve conflicts without force or manipulation. This applies not just physically, but verbally and emotionally. Personal simplicity. Examine what you truly need versus what you mindlessly consume. What possessions actually enhance your life, and which ones just complicate it? The kingdom within. Develop direct personal experience of truth rather than outsourcing your thinking to institutions, groups, or charismatic leaders. These aren't just nice ideas. They're practical strategies for creating meaning in a world that often seems meaningless. And unlike pursuing wealth, status, or fame, which are limited resources that everyone can't have equally, meaning through service is infinitely available. The factory worker can create meaning. The bedridden patient can create meaning. The child, the elder, the rich, the poor, all have equal access to this essential human project. There's one last twist to Tolstoy's story that's almost too perfect to believe. In 1910, at 82, Tolstoy finally left his wife and home, abandoning his wealth once and for all to live his final days in simplicity. He fell ill during this journey and died in a remote railway station, the world-famous Count ending his days in a humble station master's room. The man who spent years tormented by death met it with remarkable peace. Why? Because he no longer saw death as the end of meaning, but merely the end of his participation in something that would continue without him, the ongoing human project of creating more love in the world. And here's the supreme irony. By letting go of his desperate grasp on significance, he became truly significant. By surrendering his need for immortality, he gained a form of it. By focusing on others rather than himself, he became more fully himself than ever before. His ideas sparked revolutions, inspired liberation movements, and continue to transform lives over a century after his death, all because he had the courage to face the abyss we all pretend isn't there. So I'll leave you with the question. Tolstoy's life asks each of us, what world will you help create in the brief time you're here? Will you continue to chase the things that failed to fulfill even the greatest success story of his age? Or will you have the courage to build your life around what actually matters? The love you give, the suffering you reduce, the beauty you create. The meaningful life isn't found, it's built, one choice at a time. Starting now, your move.